Hi everybody. Today I have the distinguished honor of having Dr. Taras Kuzio with me to discuss the Ukrainian-Russian war, and I just wanted to introduce him briefly. Dr. Kuzio is an expert on Ukrainian political, economic, and security affairs. In 2010, he predicted the Russian annexation of Crimea that would result from the ousting of President Yanukovych, and currently is an associate with the research and a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. There are two books that I found regarding this issue that you can find on Amazon. The links will be below.
The book on the right, The Crisis in Russian Studies, can be actually downloaded free of charge. So if your viewers go to the website of that publishing house, they can be downloaded free in PDF.
Now, another issue is the decline of the idea that the UN could really, both the UN and NATO kind of turned out to be paralyzed or ineffective because of different reasons. The UN turned out ineffective because of the veto power of the founding members, which doesn't allow anything to be done against the interest of any of those powers, and so it's rendered useless in this situation, for example. And NATO is paralyzed because the threshold of intervention is so high, endangering a third world war and a nuclear war, that they can't really help anyone who is not in NATO. So in his address to the Congress, Zelenskyy proposed something very interesting, which I found actually I think is brilliant, and that is something that he called U-24, and that was some sort of a response apparatus, an organization that is neither of these, that would be independent, would be from outside and structured directly to help with immediate 24-hour response to hostilities of like brutal hostilities against civilians in such wars, and maybe man-made or natural disasters, and basically would be kind of like external to this. So it would not be related to any nuclear threat. It would not possess nuclear weapon, presumably. And I found it very interesting. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not sure how realistic it is. Certainly, I think there's going to be a lot of people saying that the UN has shown itself to be completely ineffective. If Ukraine is a founding member of the UN, because when the United Nations was set up after World War II, Joseph Stalin demanded 3 seats. Why he was given 3 seats, I don't know, but the USSR got 3 seats: 1 for the Soviet Union, 1 for Ukraine, 1 for Belarus, allegedly because Ukraine and Belarus were important in defeating Nazi Germany because of the war fronts. So Ukraine is a founding member of the UN, and Ukraine, as a founding member of the UN, has been attacked and attempts to have it destroyed by another UN member who's on the Security Council. I mean, that's ridiculous. That shows you how ridiculous is the UN if it can't do anything. I mean, the UN does have powers to, for example, create a humanitarian zone, which could have been created in West Ukraine for the protection of refugees, for the protection of civilians. But he hasn't done that. Zelensky's and Ukraine leaders have called for a no-fly zone, which NATO, of course, is afraid to do in case it gets into a shooting match with Russia. But the UN, or the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, could create something like this humanitarian zone or humanitarian region in the western part of the country, which has had a few bombings, but has not really been, physically attacked. But that hasn't been done. And if there was something like that created, it would decrease pressure on countries like Poland, who are taking most of the refugees, Poland and Romania. NATO, I think it's a bit more. I think it's not so black and white, because I think that you could argue that, for example, that Vladimir Putin has been great in bringing back some semblance of unity to NATO, and it's Vladimir Putin's military aggression since 2014 that has forced many NATO members to finally start spending 2% of GDP on defense. Germany is the new country to do that now, because prior to 2014, only 5 NATO members out of 30 actually spent 2% of GDP on defense. Now it's a lot more, and a lot of that is due to Vladimir Putin's military aggression. I think that I think also we have to be careful in that NATO as NATO members is involved in helping Ukraine fighting cyber warfare, providing intelligence on Russian military movements, and sending weaponry. I mean, 28 countries are sending weapons to Ukraine, and probably 95% of those are NATO members.
I just wanted to return briefly to the U-24 idea. Do you have any thoughts about how that would be doable?
I don't. I'm just skeptical that something like that is possible. Possibly with EU support. I mean, the EU keeps trying to build a security component to its foreign and security policy separate to NATO, but it never seems to get anywhere. Certainly, the EU needs to do. The EU is less of a red flag to Russia than NATO. And the EU has had something like an Eastern Partnership program for former Soviet states like Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova since 2010. So for 12 years now. But that Eastern Partnership has never had a security dimension. So this could potentially be that. I mean, to create something from scratch is, I think, I'd be surprised if that's possible.
Well, but I don't think that would be in time for this war. I think this was a more kind of global thinking on his part as to the future. And what's interesting in that is I imagine that would invoke not membership but sponsorship. So you would have countries sponsoring this independent, very regulated institution that would have very clear guidelines as to interference and who is able to participate or sponsor it. And it, in my opinion, it would fit in that gap between full-out war with an organization such as NATO that could imply a nuclear threat at the end of such a situation, or the inability of the UN to do so. I see it more like as a peacekeepers with teeth organization.
Right. Certainly. I mean, so in other words, what the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, always wanted to be but never became. Yeah, I mean, something along those. There certainly is a need for that, for this kind of structure, certainly. And if and when there is some kind of peace agreement signed in Ukraine, then I think that there will be think tanks debating how this could be prevented in the future. And this will be one of the, I'm sure, out of the box suggestions that will be made, of course. Yes.